All right, let's talk about a film that didn't just depict a war, it completely shattered the way Hollywood told war stories, forever.
So let's kick things off with a zinger from director Oliver Stone. It really gets to the heart of what he was fighting against. He saw movies like Top Gun and thought, wait a minute. To him, they were these dangerous fantasies, making war look like some kind of high-stakes video game where you're the hero, you get the girl, and there are no real consequences. And that was the absolute opposite of the story he knew he had to tell.
Because you see, before Platoon, Hollywood's war movies were kind of like a polished mirror. They reflected a very specific, very comfortable, and frankly, a very clean image of what war was. It was a formula, and everyone knew what they were going to get.
And I mean, just look at the difference. It's night and day, right? On one side, you've got Rambo or Top Gun. You've got your invincible hero, an obviously evil bad guy, and a big flag-waving patriotic ending. And then you have Platoon. Your main character, a scared, confused kid. The enemy? Well, who even is the enemy? And the message isn't about winning, it's just about making it out alive.
These were the rules of the game. This is what audiences expected. It made war understandable, maybe even a little bit entertaining. You always knew who to cheer for, you knew what the mission was, and you knew, in your gut, that the good guys were gonna win in the end. It was comforting.
But what was really going on behind that polished mirror? Now, we're going to look at the actual reality on the ground during the Vietnam War. You see, this war wasn't simple. It didn't just start one day with a big declaration. No, it was this slow, tangled, messy escalation that grew out of decades of colonial history and Cold War paranoia. And by 1968, which is when the movie set, America was neck-deep in a conflict that just didn't play by any of the old rules.
So here's the kicker, and this is so important. American soldiers were showing up expecting a John Wayne movie. They were expecting a war with clear front lines, obvious bad guys, and a mission they could understand. What they got was a total nightmare. There were no front lines. You couldn't tell the enemy from the civilians you were supposed to be protecting. You'd fight and bleed to take a patch of jungle one day and just give it up the next. Why were they even there? It was this huge, frustrating question mark hanging over everything.
So who could possibly tell this story? Well, it had to be someone who was actually there. It took a soldier who lived through that nightmare to finally take a hammer to that polished mirror. And that soldier was Oliver Stone.
And you got to understand, this is who Stone was when he signed up. He was a true believer, and he gives that exact same idealism to his main character, Chris. So this movie, this isn't just some story he cooked up. This is personal. It's a raw, unflinching look at his own journey from patriot to someone whose entire view of the world was just broken by what he saw.
And get this, it took him nearly 20 years after he got back to get this movie made. Just think about that. 20 years. That delay alone tells you everything you need to know about how traumatized the country was. It wasn't until the mid-'80s that enough time had passed for people to even begin to face a story this honest, a door that had been sealed shut for a long, long time.
And Hollywood, oh, they wanted no part of it. The very same industry that built that John Wayne myth of war wasn't about to pay to have it torn down. The money actually had to come from a British company. It was a story the American film industry just wasn't ready to tell.
Okay, so how exactly did Platoon do it? How did it break all the rules? Well, it starts by asking some really, really uncomfortable questions that other war movies just wouldn't dare to ask.
I mean, really think about that. In pretty much any other war movie, that's the easiest question in the world. But in Platoon, it's almost impossible to answer. The movie goes out of its way to not give you a clean, simple hero to root for, and that forces you, the viewer, to question what heroism even means in a place like this.
And then there's the big one, the really disruptive question. Because in Platoon, the enemy isn't just the Viet Cong hiding in the trees. No, it's something way more complicated. And honestly, way more terrifying.
See, what the movie does is it turns the whole conflict inward. It stops being about us versus them, America versus North Vietnam. The real fight, the central conflict, becomes a civil war for the very soul of the American soldier.
And this war is perfectly embodied by two sergeants, Barnes and Elias. They're like the angel and the devil on the shoulder of every man in the platoon. Barnes is just raw, brutal survival. Do anything, become anything to stay alive. Elias is the opposite. He's fighting to hold on to some piece of his humanity, some moral compass in all the madness. They represent two completely different ways to get through the war. And we see this all through the eyes of our main character, Chris. He shows up as this total blank slate, a kid full of all the patriotic stuff he's been taught his whole life. And then he's just thrown into this meat grinder, caught between these two father figures, Barnes and Elias. And yeah, he survives, but the kid who showed up in Vietnam, he's gone forever, replaced by someone harder, someone broken.
And that is the absolute key. Platoon just rewrote the whole war movie playbook. It's not about winning the battle. It's not about defeating the enemy. The story is about what you lose just by being there. Innocence, morality, your whole belief system. It's all about the cost, not the win.
And the impact was massive. It was immediate. After Platoon, you just couldn't go back. War movies couldn't just pretend that moral confusion and psychological damage didn't exist. A totally new standard for realism had been set.
So, in the end, that's what Platoon did. It took that simple, polished picture of war and smashed it into a million pieces. And in its place, it left this haunting question. It forced us all to consider that in a war like that, maybe the real enemy wasn't the guy you were shooting at. Maybe the real enemy was inside you. And that's a question that stays with you long after the credits roll.